Now I'm on.
You are.
All the bells and
What you been up
whistles.
to?
I mean, it's been a busy week. In fact, for me, I've been a little stressed out. I don't know if you see, like, I posted something somewhere about this. Have you ever seen that video where the guy screams singing, like projected on the mountain? This sounds psychotic as I'm describing it. it's this like it's this song, and I think the guy's Australian, but it looks like a western, and he is like um projected is not the right word, but like an image of him is like blue screened or green screened in among like the clouds and the skies over these different western vistas in this song, and the guy is screaming like while he's singing. um it's quite striking, and that has been what's going through my head periodically throughout the week as I've been trying to sort of deal with all the various things I have to deal with. I
That
believe the
sounds like
song is
fun.
called Big Enough.
Big enough. All right, I'm gonna check it out after. I've been. It's the last week of the semester here, so it's all of that craziness. And the way that plays out usually is like all the faculty get busy grading, and the students are focused, and all of this, and every single administrator that ever lives wants to schedule a meeting for the Friday, Monday, and Tuesday before Thanksgiving,
Oh.
and somebody needs to get them a memo that's bad management. Anyway, so I've been doing that, and we've been doing like rehearsal and recording for our Christmas concert, which is weird to do. We've got like these resonator masks that look like duckbills, and you like sing from behind them, and yeah, it's like watching the Huey, Dewey, and Louie do their thing.
That's nice. I
It's
would like really lean into that hard if I was this.
They're black. That's the only thing. I'm like, if I could have ordered them yellow, I would have done that for sure. Just
Well, you could paint them, right?
that's right. That's right. So here we are.
Here we are.
I should say that if you're listening to this live, um, that this episode may not come out for several weeks. We're like taking a little bit of a break on the podcast side. So I don't know when this is coming out. I don't know. That's all somebody else. But if you're listening to this live, happy Thanksgiving. If you're not listening to it live, happy next Thanksgiving, maybe. But here
Really,
we
is
are.
it going to be that long?
Probably not that long. But we are
Yeah.
taking a little pause. The streams will keep happening, but the podcast distribution is taking
Yeah,
a
but
little bit
everything
of
we're
time.
talking about is
It's
evergreen.
so evergreen. So
Uh,
today we're talking about The Mandalorian and our Falstaff Son writing project play, and the Queen's Gambit, the new Netflix
yeah,
show.
all
So I
things.
guess we can start with The Mandalorian, huh?
Sure, let's do it. So The Mandalorian in its second season on Disney Plus, the Star Wars television series, the first Star Wars television series, live action television series, we should say. There have been many Star Wars television series over the decades, all of them animated. But this is the first live action one, and after what I think is fair to say, a mixed reception, mixed and negative, maybe, to the recent films. Mandalorian has been sort of, uh, well, certainly much better received. One might go so far as to say a triumph, a huge hit, beloved, in fact, in a way that I don't know that any Star Wars film really has been on this level since the original trilogy. You know, and I think personally carries the mantle of the franchise more effectively than any other live action thing that's happened since the original trilogy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with that assessment. I every time I think about the Mandalorian, it's a positive feeling, but right behind it are a lot of negative feelings about the last trilogy.
Yeah, right. It's unreal how bad that really kind of, I don't know, set. And I don't, I should say, I don't blame the people making the films. I have a lot of sympathy for people who are undergoing any creative endeavor, and I, here's the thing: the reason that I think that The Mandalorian works so well, where it's been a tougher road for the films in recent years, is I think that the show really benefits from not having to carry the weight of being super special
Mm-hmm.
and an event. Um, so this can be a little more tossed off, and I think that that's the real secret to it, because Star Wars, I don't think, was ever meant to carry the weight of being really important like the original trilogy. By the time you got to the third movie, I think probably it built itself up to a place in the popular imagination where it felt kind of important by the time you got to Return of the Jedi. But the real key to that is just dumb, pulpy fun, right? And it was done very well. And ever since then, like from the prequels through this, last trilogy, there are things to like about all of them. But I think that one of the things that's really handicapped the series is the need to be really important. And it's just fraught with all of this, and meaning especially the sort of legacy films of the last trilogy. It's like it all just almost, it's just so much weight. And the great thing about the Mandalorian is it's really fleet and it's really light and it's really fun TV, and that's kind of amazing. Though I suppose we could talk a little bit about the show in more detail. And
I'm happy to do that, but I do have things to say about these trilogies.
Yeah.
So first, I need to get my anger out, and then I'm happy
Oh,
to
no.
talk about delight. But so I sort of take a less generous tack. It sounds like on these last three. Now I thought The Force Awakens was just fine. I don't have any real criticisms of it. On Last Jedi, I know it's hugely controversial, but I actually liked where it headed.
Yeah,
In the particularly the last third of that movie, I like the risk that it took. I like that it was intentionally transgressive. I liked all of those things.
Yeah.
And I was incredibly. I just thought the last one was the stupidest thing I've ever seen. Maybe, but like my take on the creation of that is that it there wasn't a single sort of vision behind it. I mean, the J.J. Abrams piece.
Well, there
was
clearly
sort of
was. I mean, yes,
disrupted.
there clearly was not. Right.
Right.
That's the whole thing.
And that was the main mistake. I think had any single one of those people been at the helm for all three and the arc. I mean, I know Brian Johnson, right, and J.J. Abrams are trustworthy in other ways, and so I think could have handled it. But I also think they were both sort of trapped by their childhoods and what they wanted Star Wars to mean and be, and so that's my reading on the disappointment.
Well, maybe though. I mean, Ryan Johnson, if anything, was really reacting against that, right? It was,
sure, but I
his
actually think that, like, for him, and I did like his film the best of the three, at least that third of it, right? I thought that was the best work. Is I think he was reacting to his childhood in a different way, right? So J.J. Abrams is like the good boy, and Ryan Johnson is like the troubled bad child.
A little bit, perhaps, but I think it comes from a real place. And this will just be our Star Wars segment, I guess, is what we're really going to do here.
We'll get to the Mandalorian, I promise.
Well, here's the thing. I think that what Rian Johnson did in his film, and is the thing. I have quibbles with aspects of that film, things that work for me better than others, and some things less than others in it. But the core of it, I am extremely fond of, especially the stuff with Rey, Luke, and Kylo Ren. The sort of emotional core of that film, the center of it, I think is perfect. And I know that is the storyline, the sort of nexus of those three characters, and Luke in particular is the thing that makes the people who just hate that movie hate it with a white hot burning passion. It's like, there are things I don't, like as much as others about that film, and I can sort of get into. Well, it doesn't matter, but the core of it, I think, is fantastic. And Luke's arc of becoming this embittered, unhappy person who's withdrawn from the Force, and really looking back very critically at the Jedi Order, that is of a piece with the prequels and the original trilogy, and really creates a very deft, thoughtful, and narratively satisfying through line for not just for the Jedi Order and Luke in it. The story. One of the things that always felt like a little bit of a disconnect between the prequels and the original trilogy was the implication that the Jedi really screwed up in the prequels, that they became, bloated and too prideful, that they didn't see what was coming. And Yoda had been like the head of this order that lived in a luxurious, super modern city. And then he went to go live on the crappiest of crappy swamp planets in exile because of how badly he screwed up. And the thing is, like, you had to put that together a little bit yourself, that's what Yoda did. They didn't underline that ever. Like, if you watch the original trilogy on its own, you had no idea that Yoda had once, lived in this incredible sci-fi, palace city or whatever. And, it just, you could find a through line, but you had to create it yourself. And what Rian Johnson did really elegantly is, brought those same themes up. And the idea that the Jedis had massively failed also wasn't something that you could pick up immediately from the original trilogy, right? There was no real indication that the Jedi was this, order of people who became too prideful. I mean, in retrospect, you again can put it together, but this just underlines it. And Luke comes to the same place. It's like, these people messed up. We were wrong to begin with. And I went through that same rise and fall. And then he has to get pulled out of it again, at the end. It's like relearning that lesson. And I'll tell you, the moment in that movie when Yoda comes back, as Ghost Yoda, to visit Luke, that it was an emotionally stirring moment. I was emotionally stirred by the Muppet talking to the guy. So yeah, it all really worked for me.
Yeah, it did for me too. Well, and the other thing I want to, just to transition us back to the Mandalorian and to your original thesis, which I think I agree with, is that the other things in sort of recent Star Wars memory that have not carried the weight of events have been the sort of standalones, Rogue One and Solo, which I think have been the most successful, right?
Yeah, I agree. I actually am a big fan of. I'm a big fan of Rogue One, and actually, I
Me
feel like
too.
the tide is really turning on that. Like, there's. I don't know that it was poorly received to begin with, but my sense is that there's been a building consensus that that's actually a really good movie,
Yeah.
and in the in the world, and I know Solo is controversial, but I actually like it.
Yeah, I
I
think
like.
but for me, Solo is great if you can sort of ignore the first 45 minutes, which aren't bad, just dry.
Well, and the thing that I like the best about Solo, and this really does transition us into The Mandalorian, is that it feels very slight.
Mm-hmm.
The stakes aren't high, and it's not like it's great. It's not great. Um, but it feels just like that's a fun. It reminded me. It's like this is a fun sci-fi, family movie like they used to make and don't really anymore.
Well,
It's like a good time on a Saturday morning going to see a movie. You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah,
And it's like very low stakes execution, may or may not be great. I happen to think that it's not bad, especially given the really fraught, you know, history of that film. But in its way, that's those are qualities that I liked about that, and that the Mandalorian really excels at as well, along with a lot of other stuff. Like, but the fact that it's just fun.
it's fun, and it gets what I think the original trilogy touches on. I think it gets what Rogue One does well, what Solo does well, which is that it's a western in space. I mean, that's the the thing. I mean, the Mandalorian is that. I mean, it's
Is
in
Yes,
its
it is a western
soundtrack,
in
in
space.
its vistas, in every choice it makes. It's a cowboy story,
Yes,
and there are elements of Solo that are like that. There are elements of that character, Han Solo, that are like that. Elements of Luke that are like that. And there are elements of Rogue One, which I mean, I think, what is it, the comparison that it's just like Dirty Dozen in space or whatever.
well, it's the Dirty Dozen and the Magnificent Seven a little bit as well. Um, but it's a war movie and West. Some this is not an original observation, but it's been said that Star Wars really in its like core fundamental pieces are like, you take the sort of what's his name mythology stuff. Uh, be good if I could remember
Joseph
his
Campbell.
name. Yeah, Joseph
Yeah.
Campbell mythology mixed with Akira Kurosawa, um, movies combined with westerns, combined with old World War One and Two aerial battle films, and there you go. It's Star Wars. And they lean hard into the cowboy stuff in the Mandalorian, and it really is just it's like an old it's like an old Western TV series to the point where like there is obviously a serialized aspect to it, and it's becoming more and more serialized as it continues, but it still is strikingly episodic. For the modern landscape where episodic television is it's not like it doesn't exist. When I say episodic, it's like, standalone
Mm.
episodes that don't create a really tight narrative that you have to watch from episode to episode to make sense of. It's kind of like, what's the new adventure this week?
Yeah.
And, you know, eh, those shows are all over CBS. It's like, and people watch them. NCIS is like super popular, and the CSI series and Law and Order and whatnot. Those are all things. But at this level of prestige television, which this sort of occupies, it's unusual. And it is it's effective though.
Yeah.
And then there's Baby Yoda, right?
That's the
We haven't even mentioned him, and that's really the
a
whole
stroke of genius. Um,
yeah.
it's just a stroke of genius. I mean, it's like the greatest character, you know, for on the radar since Walter White, I think.
Well, right, and it's John Favreau's real sort of insight. I mean, I have to say, like, I am so impressed with Jon Favreau
Mm.
and what he's done on this show. He's just sort of seamlessly melded these different elements and understood the property, understood Star Wars on this fundamental level that I don't know anybody, if anybody ever really understood it. Like George Lucas, I think we've talked about this before in other forums, but I don't know that George Lucas ever entirely understood Star Wars, what was appealing about it. It's like I think he had his own sort of subset of interests within the franchise that didn't always match up with the interests of people who loved it. Um, and that's his prerogative. But Jon Favreau had this real clear sense of no, this is what people love. They love the physical creatures. They love the somewhat cute humor if it's effective and it works. They love the Western stuff. And it's like, and he just gets it.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels more Star Wars than Star Wars.
Yeah, that's part of. So what I think it also gets right is that it feels of that fabric. It's got this sort of nostalgia thing going for it. So the original Star Wars trilogy is. It's not that it's not innovative, but it's down in the Muppet world, right? It's low tech. It's
low and high tech at the same time.
Well,
like, that's the real.
Yes, but what I would argue is that the prequel trilogy, right, and this last trilogy have opted entirely towards high tech. And that's part of the reason that they don't work, is because they're not puppets. I mean, and the environments are not that same.
I have to say, I mean, J.J. Abrams actually, I think, understood that as well. And I think that the later filmmakers really did get the tactile whatever is a big part of it, and, I think Lucas got very enamored with the, digital world.
And that's what happens. I don't blame him. I mean, he runs a company that does that, right? So you have the resources
used on the cutting edge of creating that stuff. And I think it's interesting. It happens to a lot of filmmakers. It happened to George Lucas, a lot of great filmmakers, which George Lucas is a, great filmmaker in the history of film. Mm-hmm. And he's not the only one to really get seduced by technology. It happened to Peter Jackson. It happened and continues to happen to James Cameron. These are people who created truly great popular films. It happened to Francis Ford Coppola. Yeah. And Steven Spielberg to a certain extent. I think that when you are playing at a certain level and you suddenly get these new tools and you can see like the ability to do certain things, that just becomes very interesting to you. I don't know that it always helps tell the best story necessarily.
But this is where I would circle back to Jon Favreau, right? Who has famously now, and I mean his other part of his Disney portfolio are animal movies at the moment,
right?
Which are extraordinarily high tech in terms of the digital effect and animation.
Animated films.
Say what?
I mean, The Lion King is an animated film.
But there's a groundedness. It feels. I mean, they're doing that on purpose, right? They're putting it in the natural world, Lion King and Jungle Book, which was fantastic as well. And there's a authenticity he's after that I think helps put all that tech stuff sort of in tension, and he's always opting for the more authentic, whatever that is. I don't know what the word is.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And what you say, I think, is also true of Iron Man, which, let it be remembered, the biggest film franchise in the history of film, whether you like it or not, like the most lucrative and successful, 23 film franchise was kicked off by Jon Favreau with Iron Man. And that tension between, I mean, I think that his great insight into in that film, and it's the thing that gave birth to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Was yes, it needs to have good action. Yes, we have all these technological tools at our disposal, but at the heart of it, I'm going to pick the quirkiest, weirdest actor I can get into a major tentpole blockbuster film, and I'm going to build, this character and this franchise around his like idiosyncratic weirdness. People don't remember now. I think younger people in particular, now that Robert Downey Jr. has spent the last 12 years being the biggest movie star on earth. But he was poisonous when that movie came out, or when they were making it. And not because he's bad. Everybody agreed he was like a crazy talented actor, but he had burned his career down by being a drug addict and getting sent to do time in prison. Mm-hmm. Like not jail, like he went to prison. And hiring him to be in a film or a television show was incredibly expensive because they required this ridiculous insurance coverage just in case he went off and started doing smack and like ran away and woke up in a child's bedroom, which he did once. Like the idea that you're going to build a franchise with the hopes of it becoming, I mean, they couldn't have even hoped that. Build a franchise that would turn into the single most lucrative film franchise in the history of the medium. And you're going to build it around this guy's weird personality is almost unthinkable. And Jon Favreau is the guy who saw that. Should also be said while we're talking about Jon Favreau, his partner on this, Dave Filoni, I think is the other piece of The Mandalorian that really makes it work. And Filoni has been the mastermind behind the last few animated series, the Clone Wars and Rebels, which really have been these instrumental in filling in gaps between the trilogies in a way that makes the flaws or perceived flaws of those various trilogies, it makes them work. Like, and has woven the Star Wars universe into a whole in the way that the movies never did. And what's fascinating is to see Dave Filoni's mythology really coming to the fore in The Mandalorian in this second season. Like characters who he's essentially responsible for creating are now lining up to become major characters on this show and really, and entering into the live action world in a way that is exciting if you've been following that. So, cool stuff.
Watch it. That's what I say.
Yeah, along with everybody else. It's on Disney Plus. Give it a look. And, see all the other thing, just to let it, a last thing to note, a note to end on with this is, it's crazy the guest stars that they get on this show are like the leads of other television shows everywhere. Like, it's kind of a spoiler if you haven't seen it, but the show's been on for a while now. Timothy Olyphant showing up as basically the sheriff of this town, playing this variation on his characters from Justified and Deadwood is the most sort of crazy. It's audacious for its obviousness, but it works like so well. It's like who else are we going to cast, right? And who else could get like him to be? You want to be a day player? This guy who's like the lead of all these major TV shows, and that's like every bit part on this show is like the lead of a different TV series. It's unreal. Anyway, fun stuff. We like it. Go watch it. You're probably already watching it. Everybody's watching it. I do feel bad for all the people who like are listening to this and don't care or know anything about Star Wars, because it's not like we gave any explanation of anything on this. Was like the most throw you into the water and assume you know what we're talking about conversation.
Catch up, y'all. That's what I say.
Yeah, there you go. Learn your nerd stuff. If you're Shakespeareans, that really connects. And that is an interesting segue, actually, into our next discussion here. The nerdy, mythology heavy sequel-ness of Shakespeare is something that we are exploring in the play that we are writing, Falstaff's Son. It's our sequel to the Henry IV and Henry V plays. Speaking of sort of audaciously presumptuous sequels to classics, we're writing one of our own. And we've been engaged in sort of a bastardized NaNoWriMo, the National November Writing Month. Man, NaNoWriMo, every time I say it, I feel super embarrassed. It's like it's an embarrassing thing to say. But we've been working on it, and we took the occasion of this November to get a little more intensive about it. We kind of did a bastardized, as I say, NaNoWriMo, and we didn't do a lot of the stuff that you're supposed to do at the beginning. We've been writing this thing for a while, but one of the things that we sort of came across in our recent development here is the NaNoWriMo character questionnaire to help you put your characters together. And it's a series of 46 different questions that you can answer about your characters. We've answered lots of characters, like, we've been talking about this play and these characters, Jeremy and I, for a few years now. But looking at this list, there are questions that we have not specifically asked or discussed between the two of us. And so we're going to take the opportunity to bat some of these things around and talk about our answers to them and see how that informs our writing process. And so you're all going to witness us going through the NaNoWriMo character questionnaire. It's exciting, Jeremy, right?
I'm excited. Let's do it.
Oh, yes.
Some of these will be fast, and some of them might require an entire episode.
Some will be fast, and some will be slow.
We will do our best.
Yes. Okay, name. Well, we know that, right?
Boy.
Or, if we want to get more interesting, his name is John Falstaff, in fact. Though he does not know that yet. His age, well, he will be various different ages throughout the play, right?
Yep.
I believe we meet him at the age of 7.
And then we greet him at the end of the play, and he's, I don't know, middle-aged. At least an unspecified middle age. I bet if we do our homework, that we could actually calculate his age. Like if we did the, it was like the final scene is like Henry V's deathbed, right? Do I have that? Am I remembering that right?
It's like all of a sudden just nothing.
So like if we did our homework, which we will do at some point, like he's middle-aged. I think he's dealing later age. I think the final scene is Henry V's deathbed or something. I think.
Well, yeah. Okay. So here's the thing. Our one of our fun little twists, which we're revealing to all of you listening to this, because welcome behind the curtain and whatnot. The play begins with the chorus character in our conception, the same chorus who existed in Henry V, who's just some guy who knows a lot of stuff. But in our story, in fact, he is the adult version of the boy. And he kicks off the play, and some version of him will probably be at the end of it after Henry has died, and maybe sometime after Henry has died. It's not, so age is a funny thing in this, story as well. Falstaff is a quote unquote old man, right? In the plays, in the Henry IV plays, and dies as a supposedly old man in Henry V. But what is an old man in Elizabethan England, right? Um, the character who Falstaff is reputed to have been modeled after, Oldcastle. Is that his name? No, is that
Yep.
right? Yeah,
John Oldcastle. Yeah.
John Oldcastle. He wasn't that old by the time he died, but depending on where in his life that's happening. Also, there's also been conjecture that much of Falstaff's sort of demeanor may have been inspired by sort of one of the university wit contemporaries of Shakespeare's.
Yeah, Robert Greene. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Robert Greene, who was, who did in fact die of, essentially drinking himself to death. And he was in his 40s when he died, but was, again, sort of considered an old man in that group. And so how old are they really? It's an interesting question. This age question, if we did this with Henry, could be interesting as well. Henry died in his late 30s. But I think in our play, he's going to probably embody something older than that.
Yeah. Worn, at least, yeah.
For the sake of sort of, hitting the notes that we want to hit. But I think we have an excuse for that, which is to say that back in that time period, people were older sooner, right? And you lived harder. And in the plays, like Falstaff, the old man, maybe he's in his late 40s, right? Or early 50s. And so, whoever would end up playing, will end up playing Henry in productions of this play are going to be a little older. And so, anyway, all that is to say the boy, I don't know, 30s, 40s by the time this ends, but him being the chorus also gives us an interesting out there too, because who knows how old that guy is, right? When we are at the end of the play. There'll be multiple actors playing the part, at least 3 that we've earmarked, like someone playing the child version of him through and starting at 7 through to him going to war in Henry V, and then the adult version of the boy, who will be in the second half of the play, or second part of the play with Henry. And then there's the chorus, who's the older, middle-aged older man version of him. So a lot to talk about with age. Holy cow! Height. How tall is this person?
All Elizabethans are short. They're about 4'6".
They're hobbits.
Yes.
He's a hobbit.
I know this because I have seen all of the suits of armor from back in the day, and they're all tiny little people.
It is true. And it's funny, like when they say, and he was a giant who strode across the field at 6 feet.
Yep.
Like this giant of a man. Eye color. What color are the boy's eyes?
I assume they're John Falstaff's color or Dal Tersheet's color, but I don't know if I'd have to do homework and see if there's
Let's say they're blue.
To that in the play. Okay,
yeah,
great.
They're probably in the text someplace, but
we'll get there.
We some angry person's gonna have an opinion about this. Physical appearance. This is actually an interesting question. In that the boy, in sort of my thinking about him, is always, like, in a weird way, physically, I think very different from Falstaff, right? And in the original text in Henry IV, there is the implied physical difference between them is actually made note of in the play. Like, obviously the boy's diminutive, he's little, in comparison to Falstaff, but you imagine him being kind of skinny, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's sort of part of the joke there. And I think that that'll carry through to him as an adult as well, that he'll be in good shape. The way that we're building him right now, he's really growing up to be a soldier, and then later a sort of um, in training to be a knight. And as an adult, he's going to be skilled in combat. He's going to be, all these things that Falstaff never was, right?
Or was, and then wore
Or was,
himself
and
out.
then
You know,
like
yeah,
went to seed, right?
yeah.
But that contrast, like, and that really gets at one of the fundamental sort of contrasts that we're looking to create here in the play, is like the difference between the boy and Falstaff, and to what extent does he have Falstaff in him, I think is a preoccupation of the story, especially later when he comes to find out that Falstaff is his father. There's sort of a curse in that, and maybe a blessing that he comes to find, but it hangs over his head. Strange or unique physical attributes. Do we have any of those?
Well, I think part of our work here is to like go back over the descriptions of the boy, and there are some in these plays, just I don't know, dainty youth or whatever, as an example.
Yeah.
So I think there's some things to pick up on there. One of the things I'm interested in is sort of watching him. So watching him have the DNA of Falstaff's physicality and the sort of breeding of Henry's physicality, if that makes sense, and seeing how that can play out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, and again, gets at a thematic sort of idea in the play that really both Henry and Falstaff are his fathers in this story. Again, not to pat ourselves on the back too much, but Falstaff's son is, as much about the boy as it is about Henry as well, in that they're both, sons to Falstaff. And in the same way, the boy is also Falstaff's son, but becomes a surrogate son to Henry later. And so the melding of those different, physical types and also the breeding of it all, it's an interesting question. Favorite clothing style or outfit?
I mean, this is sort of what it's sort of contextual based on where we are in the play, right? But
Yeah.
it goes from sort of page, which is up. I mean, it's up in status. A page is relatively not high status, but it's not a pauper, right? All the way up to soldier attire, member of the court, court adjacent, that kind of thing.
Right. I mean, he was, in our conception of this, yeah, he goes from being a page to eventually being a courtier, like, Henry's main sort of personal assistant, what have you. So if we're talking about sort of class level by clothing, it's always going to be pretty nice. Except for, maybe at the beginning when Falstaff's falling on hard times and maybe not upkeeping him as much as he ought to. There's going to be a certain amount of that. And then after Falstaff dies and the boy is sort of in the wind a little bit, things might get hairy. But certainly after Henry sort of, adopts him, essentially, after the events of Henry V, he's going to be in pretty high style. For a person of his stature, his standing. Where does he or she live, and what is it like there? He lives in England mostly, right?
Well, we talked about in a prior episode, how he's sort of raised in a manor of some sort, and then of course he's at the Boar's Head, and then later on he's in a camp, he's at court, he's lots of
right. I mean, what the upshot is that he ends up having this really a lot of variety in terms of where he's lived, growing up initially in place of some privilege and comfort as a member of noble household, and then into the Boar's Head, which is sort of wild and debauched and strange an environment, and then literally on the battlefields in France, and then suddenly with the king for the rest of his life. I mean, it's an amazing spectrum that he'll have occupied there. So it's like all kinds of things. He's seen a lot, our boy, by the time we get to the end of this play. Defining gestures or movements, i.e. curling his or her lip when he or she speaks, always keeping his or her eyes on the ground. We haven't built any of that.
No. I mean, it's the same thing I said earlier. It's like we're trying to figure out some things that might show the connection between Henry, the breeding side, and John Falstaff, the DNA side, and probably Daltershi as well. While we're thinking about that.
No, that's true. Things about his or her appearance he or she would most like to change. Oh, that's interesting.
I need to think about that one some more. But what I would say is that at least in my imagination, there could be some opportunity for some self-consciousness on the youth side, like he is too, whatever that is, the waifish. He's trying to build himself up to be a soldier and do all the right things pages do, posture, physique, all of those things. So.
Well, we went through the first 10 of these questions and actually talked a lot. We could keep coming back to this list.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Let's leave it here for right now. And for the sake of, we'll come back to this list. We'll keep going through it. And it's obviously helping us to think of some interesting things here and peek behind the curtain, helping us to coalesce our ideas. So more on that later. We'll put it to bed for the moment. And move on to our final topic of discussion.
The Queen's Gambit.
Which is The Queen's Gambit.
Yeah. It's a new Netflix show.
Miniseries, technically.
Limited, I guess. Miniseries. It's gotten a lot of attention. Tell us what you think about it.
Well, I really like it a lot. By the time you are listening to this, if you're not watching on the live stream, I guess it's going to be old news, which is something that I don't love. I mean, that's a byproduct of the way that Netflix releases all the episodes of their shows at once, which I think has really kind of bit them in the butt since, in the years since that was the new hot thing to do, because their shows don't develop the following that they might. Like The Mandalorian, I think, for instance, owes a lot of its popularity to the fact that it sort of grows from week to week and had that opportunity. Queen's Gambit, by the time you're listening to this on the podcast feed, may well be far in your rearview mirror. And some of you may have already watched it, but if you have not, go back to it. It's very good. And the thing, so it's set in a number of different years. In fact, it takes a not dissimilar approach to examining a person's life to what we've just been talking about with our plans for Falstaff's son, where it's this woman who in the 1960s is, we get a brief sort of moment with her as an adult at the beginning of the first episode, where she's about to go play in a major international chess championship, and this is not spoiling anything because it's literally the first scene of the film of the show. She wakes up from what was clearly a drunken stupor, in a disheveled state in a Paris hotel room, which has been totally ripped apart and looks, debauched and messed up. And she takes a handful of prescription pills and throws them in her mouth and drinks a couple of bottles of something and goes running out of the room so that she can make it to this major international chess championship, this sort of very beautiful young woman. And as she's about to start playing, we then flash back some not entirely defined number of years to when she was a child at the age of 9, going to an orphanage because her mother, who was raising her as a single mother, killed herself in a car crash, which was also intended to kill the girl as well, but did not. And she goes to an orphanage, and again, this all comes out fairly quickly in the show, learns to play chess there.
With a character played by one of my favorite character actors.
Who is that?
Bill Camp. I love everything he does.
What are other things that people might have seen him in?
Well, he's like in everything, but the one it's an HBO limited series a couple years ago where he played a detective, and it was really good.
Yeah, but he's great in this show too, by the way. But yeah, she learns to play chess, and also at the same time, in fact, in a way that is presented as parallel to each other and dependent on each other, she develops a real narcotics habit because the people at the orphanage are drugging the kids in order to keep them under control. And that's an element of this that's a person, actually someone that Jeremy and I both know. I was talking about the show on Facebook and mentioned it's like drugs are her superpower, derisively, but in fact, and if you watch the first episode, like that's sort of the implication. But as the show goes on, I think it becomes a much less sort of cheap gimmick, and really truly more of an examination of the way that genius is often paired with addiction and certain vices that are the other side of that kind of that kind of talent. As the show progresses, it becomes part of it is that the way that it's shot is very fanciful and heightened, and stylistic in a way that I think would seem to, again, give you that impression that drugs are her superpower, and it creates this sort of magical world that maybe seems reductive and cheap, except that the show's analysis of those issues is really quite deft and sophisticated, especially as it continues on, and very straightforward in the way that it deals with it, in a way that's smart and interesting. So stick with that if you find it whatever.
Yeah, there on paper there are a lot of reasons why I would not like this show, and I will say what they are. The material is potentially incredibly boring. And not only the material sort of character-wise, but potentially, should say, but also the sort of the concept of the exploration of genius is something that's been told over and over again, and this mid-century setting has been done a billion times, and so all of these things stack up in such a way that for me it's like I could have seen this thing 100 times by now. My sort of ongoing criticism of things that do what this is trying to do is that they all devolve into Dead Poet Society. It's like a mid-20th century exploration of genius, downward arc, depressing, and it's about that personality.
Sure, it's a little bit A Beautiful Mind. It's a little bit, like as an example of this kind of thing, or what's that movie that Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio do, which is all about the ennui of the 1950s of 1950s suburbia, and hello, don't do that. Or just a bunch of other things that you've maybe seen before. But this is really very deftly and well told. It sidesteps a lot of that.
Yeah, and I just find it captivating. I it does deal subtly with those things. It does deal with imagination in a creative way. And I the other day when I made some cheeky comment about Beautiful Mind sucking, which I think it does. But one of the things that sort of put Beautiful Mind on the map in people's imagination, I think, was to play with reality, but not admit that you're doing that.
Yeah, and this has some.
And this ties in with that, and I think does a really clever, effective job that feels filmic as opposed to TV. And that scratches my itch.
Right. And to that point, I mean, that's the thing that actually really drew me in the most. The filmmaking is really impressive and spectacular on this. It was written by Scott Frank, who is a screenwriter of some note. You've seen work that he's done over the years as a writer going back decades. He wrote Dead Again, the Kenneth Branagh film, Little Man Tate, Malice, that film, Get Shorty, Out of Sight, the Steven Soderbergh movie, Minority Report, so, and The Wolverine, and Logan. And this is his, and he directed this in addition to writing all of the episodes of it. He's a really very good director, which is not always the case with writers. But I mean, it's really well told and really well observed. And in the second episode, for instance, there's this, she's going out and playing chess against essentially professional chess players for the first time, or going into the world of competition for the first time. And like the way that they shoot it is all in the faces. There's these competition that she's in with this like sort of snotty highly ranked player, and it's all on their faces, and it tells the story really well. I mean, the actors are really expressive, but it takes a really good filmmaker to do that. And in contrast to that game, there's a game a little earlier between her and another character that really feels like a seduction. And and the mastery of tone in the show is really spectacular. Like in the first episode, there's this sort of pervasive sense of dread, and it's accomplished by doing so little, that's obvious. And, you chalk that up to being just a really good filmmaker. And that is the thing that has really stuck with me. It's a really well-made series. So, go check it out.
Check it out.
It's good stuff. We recommend it. Has our seal of approval for whatever that's worth, right?
For sure.
Well, and with that, I guess our hour is upon us, is it not?
It is. And so, thank you for joining us. As always, you can tell us what you think, including that you hate our guts, by emailing us at ours, that's HOURS, at sweetteashakespeare.com. Happy Thanksgiving, if it applies to you. If not, happy whatever you're doing. We'll talk soon.
Talk to you later.
Ta-ta.
For now.